wanted to do just a quick video as to kind of what it's like traveling internationally right now from the US to South Korea and vice versa. There are a few things that are, I'd say, pretty similar or exactly the same as when I flew in July, and there's some things that are slightly different. So I thought I'd hop on and create just a quick little update video as to what it's currently like, or what it is currently like around January 2022. For those that are planning on flying into the United States right now as of December and January, you have to have your test, your negative COVID test, within a day. It says 24 hours, but it means just like a day of when your flight is. So even if I have a flight that is, let's say, on a Saturday, and maybe it's at it's the last flight and it's like Saturday at 9 p.m., I can still get a test Friday morning. So even though it's more than 24 hours, it's within a day of my flight for going from a different country into the United States. Now, that test does not need to be a PCR, so mine was able to be an antigen test. The nice thing with that is you can get those as a rapid test. Here in Seoul, I was able to go to an ENT, ear, nose, and throat office and get an antigen test. Was able to get it done there and made a reservation. And I want to say it took less than a half hour to actually get my results. There was a little bit of a line because there was quite a few people getting antigen tests to travel because it was right around Christmas and the holidays. But the actual getting the test and getting the results part was pretty short. I want to say at the place that I went to, which I can put in here where I went, I want to say that it was right around, for me, it was right around 66,000 won, which is roughly around $60. So it wasn't too bad, especially being able to get it within such a small time frame. You can get tests at the airport, but they do fill up pretty quickly. And then you can get either the rapid test or the PCR. But like I said, they do fill up pretty quickly, and they are pricier because you are paying for that convenience of it being at the airport and knowing that it's going to count. So I would suggest, I got it the day before and it was super quick. Was able to get my results, got it printed out, and then I just stayed the night before my flight near the airport just so that I had a super quick 10 to 15 minute taxi ride to get to the airport the next day. Once you get to the airport for your flight into the US, I had to go through immigration, so they knew where I was going, how long I was going to be there. I had to do a re-entry permit so that when I came back, my visa was still valid. And then once I got to the gate, they had checked my PCR test before when I went to check my luggage. So they checked it there and made sure it was okay. And then also right as I was getting on the plane, they checked my paperwork again. I got onto my plane, flew from Incheon to Detroit. When you get to your first stop in the US, this is super important if you have a connecting flight, you will need to recheck your luggage. It's important to remember that you have to recheck your luggage, that it's not going to go automatically all the way to your final destination, because I have heard about people not realizing that, and then their luggage is left at a different part of their journey because they didn't realize they had to check it. So even though I was going all the way to Orlando, my luggage wasn't automatically going to go there. I had to go get off my plane at Detroit. I went through customs. They checked my paperwork. They saw where I had been. They also checked my PCR test again. And then you go out to this area where it has all of those big machines, conveyor belts that have the luggage, you need to grab your bag again. Even if at the Detroit airport, I grabbed it and I probably walked less than 50 yards to drop it back on another conveyor belt, you have to do that. So I grabbed mine from the conveyor belt. I was walking and there was like a little guard there, and they had me pause and they asked me a couple of questions of where I was coming from, how long I was staying, and just a few things of like, do you have certain things in your luggage? Do you have this much money on you? Which was like $10,000, which I laughed and I was like, no, I'm a teacher. So they ask you those things, and then from there, you kind of like recheck it. There's a conveyor belt. You just put it back on. Once I had rechecked my bags, you actually have to, even though I have never left the airport, I've gotten onto the airplane in Incheon, and I'd already gone through like TSA there, and I went through customs at Detroit. You have to go through TSA again. I would make sure, if you are having an international flight and then you have a connection in the US, give yourself a little bit longer for that layover, because it is going to take some extra time. I was glad that I had enough time during my layover. I think my layover in Detroit was around 2 to 2.5 hours, and going through customs, rechecking my bag, and then waiting for TSA, that easily took up over an hour. So I was glad that I had at least 2 hours. Like I said, I think I had 2.5. From going through TSA, if you have any liquids, again, you have to dump them out. So I had gotten an unopened water bottle on the plane, and they're like, yeah, you can't take that with you. So I just had to throw it away. But you go through TSA again, and then you find your gate. This time, since I'm already within the US and they have like checked all of my things, they didn't ask to see my PCR test anymore. I just got on my plane, and then I landed in Orlando, picked up my bag. It had made the trip because I had rechecked it. And then I was able to get picked up by my family, and we went about our way. On the return trip, to get back into Seoul, you have to get a PCR test. It cannot be like an antigen test. I know that there is like a rapid PCR that I think they say that you can get now, and the NAAT test, which you can get at like a Walgreens or CVS. They also are accepting those. I'm on an expat forum on Facebook, and they have been talking about how those are accepted. I would make sure, if you are traveling like from the United States into South Korea, I would be looking and planning ahead for when you need your PCR test and making an appointment, especially with just like the holiday season. And so a lot of people were traveling, which I would suspect is going to be the case when things start to open up a lot more. Those PCR tests can fill up pretty quickly. I had other teachers that were in other locations around the United States for the holiday break, and they had a lot more trouble finding a PCR that they could get done. I was able to get my PCR test done at CVS. I had a couple of teachers that said that theirs actually got canceled through CVS or Walgreens, so they had to scramble a little bit. Some of them actually had to go to like a clinic or a hospital to get their PCR taken, which did cost more money. I scheduled 2 different tests because I wanted to make sure that I had the results not only within the 72-hour window that you need to have it, but I also wanted to make sure, if in case there were some delays, that I had kind of a backup plan. Flights that were returning to South Korea were on the 5th, so I made sure that that Sunday before, I had scheduled to get a test in the afternoon, and then I also scheduled to get one that Monday morning. Both of my tests through CVS were through their drive-through, and they both were free with my insurance, but I think they're also free for anyone that is uninsured in the US right now as well. When I went on to CVS's website, you can find your location and then find areas that are near you and look for their available times. I would do that well beforehand to make sure that you have it scheduled. I also would do too, just in case it would get canceled or something would happen. When I got mine signed up for, I got a confirmation email, and then the day of, I got like confirmation texts with my number that I had to tell them, as well as where I was supposed to show up. When I showed up, each of the CVS branches that I went to, even though they're like really close to each other, they had two different ways of doing it. So I would make the person walk you through the steps. My first pharmacist at CVS was super helpful and walked me through exactly what the procedures were, made sure my name and my birth date were on the vial, talked to me about how long to put the little swab into my nose, easiest nose swab because I was gentle with myself, which was amazing. But did the nose swab, put it in the little collection vial, and then she told me how to put it in. And then when I would get the results, for CVS, they run theirs through a website called MyChart, so you have to create an account. They're not going to print out the results for you. I received an email that told me that my results were done, and then I logged on to MyChart. I was able to see them, and then I had to go somewhere to print them off. So you could either go to like your local library, or I got lucky that one of my parents' neighbors, Jean, she let us use her printer so that we could print those off. My test on Monday, even though it was at a CVS that was really close, it had a totally different procedure of like what the test swab looked like, what the vial looked like, how you were supposed to put it in the packaging, which was interesting to me that they had completely different methods, even though they're both CVS. So I would just make that person walk you through exactly what it is that they're doing, because when I got all the way done, I was telling my mom, I was like, I don't know if I'll get those results because I don't know if I did it completely correctly, because it was very different with like the pouches than the first one was that I had. So I was like, I hope they have my name on it, but it was just a little bit weird. I ended up getting them back, so it was fine. With both of the results, I got each of them back within a day, not 24 hours, but I got them back within a day. So my first test that I got it done right around 1:30, and I got the email telling me that my results were done the following day around 11 p.m. So it was over 24 hours. So something to keep in mind, I would allot yourself at least 2 days instead of just 24 hours. You're going to be really stressed. Even with my second test that I got at 10:30 in the morning on Monday, I got my results Tuesday at, I want to say around 6 or 7 p.m. So again, over 24 hours. With the results, I know one of the things when I first came here I was really worried about is, do those results have to be within 72 hours of my first flight? Do they have to be 72 hours within my second flight? Because I've heard a lot of stories of the flight attendants or the people checking it saying it has to be within 72 hours of your flight that's leaving the United States to come into Seoul. For mine, because I booked both of my tickets at the same time and they were both through Delta, when I looked it up on Delta, it said it's 72 hours from your first flight, because they were both like on the same itinerary. So if you have two that are through the same airlines and you've scheduled them, or like you bought your tickets at the same time, it should be within 72 hours of that first flight. I would double check their website because Delta even had it on their website. So I knew if anyone was going to have any issues, if we had a delay or something, I was going to pull that up. But there were no issues because I was within the 72 hours anyway. If you have connecting flights that are like different airlines, or maybe you booked them at different times, so they're on like different itineraries, that's where you would want to double check with the 72-hour window, because then you're probably going to have some issues with it needing to be 72 hours from the flight that is leaving the United States to go to Seoul. So when I was in the United States and I had gotten my PCR test done for the return flight through CVS and I had it printed out, I went to the airport. It was pretty early when I went to the airport. They're currently recommending about 3 hours for international flights, and even with my first flight being from Orlando to Detroit, I'm glad that I arrived fairly early because there were a lot of people traveling out that day. I have Sky Priority with Delta, so I was able to do that line to check in my bag and get my tickets, which was great because the regular line was incredibly long. Even my line was kind of long, but I was definitely glad I was in that one and not the main line. When you get to the check-in counter for Orlando, even though that first flight is a domestic flight, they still have to check on my PCR test. They have to check my passport. They have to make sure all of my documents are fine. With Delta, you're able to do some of that prior to boarding your flight. So I was able to actually upload my passport number and my PCR test results on their website before coming in. So she was able to see that I already had them in there and checked my things. We checked my bag and I went through to the TSA. The TSA line was pretty busy. In the past, I've always had like a flight that's going out at like 6 or 6:30 in the morning when I'm leaving Orlando. My flight was at 8:30. And so I was still there around like 6:30, and it was pretty long. I think it took me like 40 minutes to get through TSA. Once I got through TSA and I got to my gate, they had already checked all of my paperwork, so I was all set. I know there were certain people that must have also been connecting to Incheon because they were, well, I overheard them say that, but they were also checking their PCR and their passports while they were there as well. I got from Orlando to Detroit because I wasn't having to go through customs because I was still within the same country. I just was able to go to my next flight. When I was there at the gate, they had to check my passport, my temperature, and my PCR test before I could even board the flight. And they kind of like had a little checklist and checked me off. Boarded the flight, went the full like 13 hours. When I got into Incheon, it still took, my first time in July, it took, I want to say like 2.5 hours to get through all of the steps. It still took a good 2.5 hours to get through all the steps again. So even though we've been with the pandemic for a while, it still takes a while to get through all of those steps. Once I was in Incheon, it was similar to my experience in July. When you first get there, it's the same initial line where you have to wait for them to check your PCR test, for them to look at your passport. And I think that's also where they check about like your re-entry. For that line, it really depends if you happen to be landing when another flight is landing. I was landing when another flight was landing, so there was quite a long line. From that first line, they have an area where you can split 2 ways, and it's supposed to be that if you're a foreigner, that you're supposed to go to the right. Now, I have several of my co-workers that for some reason the people told them to go to the left line, and they completely missed a step that they were supposed to be explaining what they were supposed to do during quarantine. And so after talking to my coworkers, they're like, we did not get any of that explanation. I would also make sure that you're checking the signs, because if that was their first time coming through, they might have been super nervous because they really didn't get any information about quarantine. I was directed to the line on the right, which when you got over there, if you need to get like a KT phone plan, they had a little hub right there so you could get a Korean number. I didn't need that because I already have my Korean number. So I just got in the line, and then when you go up, they are checking on kind of where you're going to stay during quarantine. So they wanted to check my Korean phone number. They wanted to check my address for where I was staying. And then they want your guardian's phone number. So for me, since I'm staying at my apartment and I have my own phone number, he just said, oh, it's your phone number is the guardian number. And he just called it to make sure that my number actually connected to my phone. And that was fine. This is where there was a little bit of confusion. So I was flying in on the 6th is when I got there. And apparently they had just changed apps again. I know they've gone through a few different quarantine apps. The one that they're currently using, I'll put on the screen here so you can see what it looks like. Apparently they had just changed to this app like within like the day I got there, and like the day prior we had some coworkers that came home and they were still using the old app that I used in July. So within that one day, they changed. Because of that, like I could not find it on my app store. They had like a QR code for me to scan. It would not find it. I asked him if there was something I should type in, and my worker just said no. So depending on who you get when you go through the line, you will get different answers. I had another coworker that was at someone else in the line, and he typed it in and was able to find it on her phone and helped guide her through the process of setting up her app. Mine didn't. And so I had said, I know I'm supposed to check in twice a day, and he just said, well, you couldn't find it with the QR code, so it's because it's new, we can't find it on your phone. And I asked him if he could help me like maybe search for a word to find it, and he said no, and he sent me on to the next line. So while I was waiting in the next line, I actually talked to that coworker because we had been on the same flight, and I asked her what he typed in on her phone to be able to find it, and she said self-Q for like self-quarantine. I typed that in on my phone and I could find it. So while I was in that line, I went ahead and downloaded the app myself and started to fill it out. I know that at one point when you're filling it out, it's going to ask for like the agent code so that you can continue downloading the app. And they had told us that the agent code was Corona. Like they had it on the printout, like if you get to this step and you need, enter Corona. That did not work. So I hopped onto the expat form that I'm on. I used that and it worked. So I was able to download the app, put my information on it, and then I'm good to go. I know that my guy had said, well, if we can't get it to work, they'll call you in a few days and they'll help set it up over the phone. I'm terrible with having to listen to directions over the phone and not get flustered, so I just wanted to be able to do it myself. So I was glad I was able to do that. When I got into, this would now be the third line. This is the line where they checked foreigners. So we kind of went out into our own line again, where they were checking on like your visa status. So they had to look at my ARC and make sure that I was cleared for re-entry. Got through that. That line was actually, once I was done waiting with the line, the actual step in the line was pretty quick. And then I got into a line which was everyone to go through immigration. Went through immigration. They took my fingerprints. They took a picture of me, and she just checked my documents and my passport. I think she scanned it. And then I was free to go through. I collected my bags at baggage claim. At this point, it had been like 2 hours, I want to say, of waiting in line. So I grabbed my bag at baggage claim, went through customs. That is the quickest line that you have. I just handed them my little customs declaration sheet that I had nothing to declare. And then I went out. You go through kind of like a set of sliding doors, and that's where you enter the main area where, like, if you had people picking you up, this would be where they are waiting. So you go through these doors, and they asked me if I had reserved a taxi, if I was staying at a government facility. I said I was just heading back to my apartment. They asked if I, again, had that taxi. I said no. And so they sent me to a little booth, and that little booth asked me to write down my number, my name, and my address. They called up a taxi service, and told me that the taxi was going to be 80,000 won from the airport to where I was going. Got in the taxi, came home, and then I have been in quarantine. Your quarantine technically starts, so like your 10 days starts the next day. So even though I got here around kind of like the end of the afternoon, early evening, and I got to my house, my flight landed around like 4, and I got here around, I want to say 7:30 when I got through everything and I got home. So even though I got here that day, my quarantine does not start until the next morning. So my quarantine actually goes from, rather than the 6th, which is when I arrived, it starts on the 7th and then goes through and it gets done at noon on the 16th. So that's my 10 days. With me getting here on Thursday, then you're supposed to get your COVID test like within the next day or 2 days, I think tops, but really like the next day once you have gotten into quarantine. So on Friday, I was able to walk to my district's like testing facility. So I walked there and showed up right around 1 o'clock. So they usually are open for a lot of the testing facilities from like 8 in the morning until, I want to say, 11:30 or noon. You want to check your district office, and then they close for lunch. And so then our district office opens again right away at 1. So there was a little bit of a line when I got there. It wasn't too terrible. They had QR codes so that while you were waiting in line, you could scan it and you could fill out like your name, your birth date, when you were gone, where you were gone to, and like the length of your quarantine, so that by the time I got up to the front, they already had like all of my information. I just got up there, they looked at my ARC. If you don't have an ARC, this would be when you would show them your passport. They checked that, and then she grabbed a vial with my name and birth date on it and a swab, handed those to me. And then I go to the next line where you have someone who's like in this little trailer with gloves that they can reach out and touch things, and you hand them your swab and that vial, and then they do the little test. They put it in the vial and they hand it to you, and there's a little tray that you place them in. And I got my results via text message the next day. For my second PCR test, it will probably be similar to when I had my second PCR test for my first quarantine. They want you to get it the day prior or up to 2 days prior. So for me, my end date is Sunday. I could get my test on Saturday or Friday to get my test results. And then you can leave on your day at noon. And usually they like call to double check, and you just wait till noon, and then you can tell them like, my quarantine is done, I'm leaving, and you can delete the app. A few things on the app are now changed with this newer version. So you can actually request to leave. So rather than when my first quarantine happened, when I left to get my test done, they like contacted me and they're like, where are you going? And I was like, I'm going to get my PCR test, remember? And they're like, okay, make sure you come right back when you're done. With the new app, you can actually put that request in that says like, I'm leaving at this time for my PCR test. This is the address that I'm going to. There's also a few other things, like if you would have to go for like a medical emergency, you could put it on the app, and they have some different ways to contact people if you need to. So there are a few changes on the app, things that look just a little bit different from the previous app. I think that pretty much wraps it up for kind of what quarantine is currently looking like for like December/January 2022. So of course, right as I was wrapping up the video, I actually got a call. So it is still Tuesday. I got a call and they were dropping off my COVID kit. So I thought I would show you what it is that, at least for my district, the Yongsan district, what gets dropped off. So we've got 3 K94 masks, which honestly you can't have, you can never have enough of, because with air quality, even after the pandemic, We would be using these if it's like a bad day for air. We've got, yes, our spray, our like disinfectant spray, which I've got another one of these, which I've like never used, so I now have two. We have Puriband. I have no idea what this is. This is totally new. I'm very curious. So this is what it looks like. I will have to, this is totally weird. I've never gotten these before. Looks like they're supposed to be like little stick-on Band-Aids. I will look up, like with Papago, what this is, and I will put it in here as to what it is, because I have no idea. It says, it looks like you can like take one off and put it on the back of your wrist. I don't know. I will put more information up as I find it. We've got our trash bin. So any trash that I have during this week is supposed to go into here, and then I'm supposed to put this in another bag. We've got, I have a feeling, hand sanitizer. Yes, hand sanitizer. And, oh, this is interesting. No, is that what this is? These are thermometer bands. Oh my gosh, their technology here is so cool. So you put these on. Oh my goodness, that is so cool. So you're supposed to put this on, attach it under the ear, around the neck, forehead, or around the wrist, which these are like little tiny stickum ones. So you just put these on, and you put it on for 1 minute. Be careful not to touch the water. I don't know. Be careful not to touch it. Please take off after measuring body temperature and keep it separately available for 3 to 4 days. So if it stays brown, that means you have like a low temperature under 35 degrees Celsius. If it's green, it's normal. And then if it's yellow, it means that you have a fever. So I think when they're saying, please do not touch the water, it means that it doesn't want you to touch the little actual part, which right here looks brown, because there's one that I touched a little bit with my thumb and it did start to change color, kind of like mood rings, almost a little bit. So I'm sure you're just supposed to kind of like put it on, leave it for a minute, and then check what the temperature is. That is ingenious. That is so cool. Yeah, so they must have little bands for it, and this one's just like a little sticker. So it's got the guidelines for everything. It has it both in Korean, and then it has it in English as well. And then for me, it just has like a little paper that has my name, my birth date, and like kind of my reasons for like my notice of quarantine, which just says reason for quarantine, entry from being abroad. It says the date when I started, the date when I end. It says my address on here. And that is pretty much it on that one. Yeah, so that is what is in that little quarantine package. I would say pretty much most of this is the exact same that I got before, like the hand sanitizer and the disinfectant spray, which you would use to spray like in your trash too and on the bag before you would get rid of them, as well as the masks. But the little thermometer bands are definitely pretty cool. Last time I just got like a regular thermometer, which I'm glad to have gotten that, but I do understand if they're having to give this to everyone that's in quarantine, these would work the best. So pretty cool. I've never seen these before. But that now wraps up everything that I have seen. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to put them in that comment section. Like, subscribe to the videos, to the channel. It'd be super helpful and I really appreciate it. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Goodbye.